In this lesson, we'll start to explore some of the different light types that we have available in Softimage. Okay, so for this lesson, I'm just going to be starting with a blank scene. And for this particular lesson, there really won't be any sort of scene files to open up. This will be purely a demonstration lesson. So to drop in our lights within Softimage, it's a relatively simple process. Within any of our different menus, in my case, I'm just going to stick to the modeling menu. We can go to Get, Primitive, and then down to Light. Now from here you can see that we do have a few different light types to choose from, and each one of these different lights will actually cast its light out in a little bit different way and in a little bit different pattern. So depending on the type of light that we want to get within our scene, we have a lot of different choices. So let's start with something like the point light, and let's just see sort of what the light distribution on that looks like. Now whenever you drop in a point light, this is normally not what you would see. This is just simply a little scene that I've set up just to make it a little bit easier to actually understand just how this light is being distributed through this point light. So the point light is really what you could think of as just a normal light bulb, where this light is actually being distributed out in all different directions. Now again, these little arrows that we see here are not part of the light, and these are not something that you will see. I've just included these in as just purely as a visual aid, just so you can see this. So with this point light, again, it's going to be casting light out in all directions evenly. And if you were to take your point light and start to actually move this around, you can see that the light actually does follow it. And again, it's emitting out in all different directions. So the point light is one that you'll probably be using pretty frequently because it is, again, just a very, very good general use light. Now we also do have something like the spotlight. And again, I've just quickly set up this little scene here just to give you a little bit better idea of how this light is set up. So really, like the name suggests, a spotlight is really just behaving like a real-world spotlight would, where we have this light that's being distributed in a very focused fashion and is creating sort of this nice contained little cone of light. So these are really, really good for if you want to get light that is pointing in a very specific direction and really just lighting a very certain area of your scene. Now, these two light types that we've looked at, the point light and the spotlight, are probably the two types that you'll use most frequently. Although Softimage does have a few other light types that we can choose. For example, we have something like the light box. And this light box is essentially doing the same thing that a spotlight would, where we have this very focused cone of light that can be adjusted however we want. But instead of light coming from one single point, like the traditional spotlight would, this light box is trying to simulate light that's coming from a much larger area. So we can actually start to get some softer shadows and things like that. And we'll explore just what this light box does in a little bit more detail in one of our later lessons of this course. So this will make just a little bit more sense how this starts to differ from some of our traditional point lights or spotlights. Alright, so we also have a flat light. Now this is one of the newer light types in Softimage, so depending on which version you're using, you may not have access to this particular light type. Now this particular light is definitely unique compared to the others, because this particular light doesn't necessarily just radiate light outward, it's really sort of simulating light that's coming from all different directions. So you sort of have light that's coming outward, you have light that's simulating as though it's coming inward. And what you'll notice about something like this flat light is no matter where we place it in our scene, you notice that the overall lighting never changes. So this flat light is really meant to simulate sort of just soft, maybe indirect illumination or secondary illumination, lighting that would normally be coming from all different directions and just sort of lighting your model from all different angles. Again, this is one of the newer light types in Softimage, so depending on which version you have, you may or may not have access to this particular light type. Now the last one that we're going to look at before we wrap up this lesson is called the infinite light. Now the infinite light is another very unique light type. There are really no other lights in Softimage that behave quite like the infinite light. So the infinite light is really meant to simulate something like a sunlight or some kind of a light source that's very, very far away. Now, unlike our other light types in Softimage, the infinite light doesn't have light that necessarily radiates outward from one particular point. If you take a look at these little visual references that I've added in here, you can think of these as the light rays. Now you notice these light rays, again, don't radiate outward from this particular light source. Instead, these light rays actually sort of travel more in parallel. So they're moving really just right next to each other, and if you could imagine these rays extending all the way out into infinity, that's essentially what this infinite light does. So if I were to take my infinite light and actually rotate this, you can see that it's actually lighting my scene completely evenly all throughout, so it really makes no difference whatsoever where this infinite light is placed as far as its movement. You'll notice as I move it around, the lighting in my scene doesn't change at all, because again, these light rays reach all the way out into infinity in all directions. So really the only thing that you have to worry about whenever placing an infinite light is just its rotation or its angle that these light rays are hitting your surfaces. So again, if you're going to be rendering some sort of an outdoor scene, something where you need to have even illumination across an infinitely far distance, this infinite light becomes a really good light source to use. Again, this is really useful for things like sunlight or any kind of just overall illumination. Okay, so that's a look at some of the different light types that we have in Softimage. Now, beginning in our next lesson, we'll actually start to explore some of the different parameters of these different lights.